This is the Scannies, where the players and teams who deserve to get awarded for both the good and the bad get recognized. From the league's best defensive defenseman to the NHL's most talented goon, we are here to settle the best Saturday night debates. The Scannies is the least official, but perhaps the most important hockey award show you may ever watch. But without further ado, welcome to Top Shelf, brought to you by Skyscanner. I'm Aidan Thakkar, joined by my panelist or nominee guys, I guess, today. Cushman, Levi Smith.
Nominee guy.
John Matisz, nominee guys, because that makes sense.
I like that.
John's a voter, actually, for the real awards that are happening, and the votes go in on, what, Friday?
Friday.
And how does that work? You got a Google form? Is there an app? Is it a paper ballot? You got to register?
So we're not in the paper era anymore. I'm sure it was at some point, but as long as I've been doing it, it's been via email. Someone from the NHL emails you, and it works through Ernst & Young, one of those companies that kind of double checks things, and is sort of like a middle between the voters and the league to keep things on the up and up. But yeah, there's no real technological advancement here. It's a lot of email. It makes creates some errors. Like you'll see every year, it's like, oh, this voter screwed up in this way, this voter screwed up in that way. I luckily haven't been one of those voters. I try to be really thorough, especially before I submit. I check everything, spelling, positions, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would say it's a fairly archaic system at this point.
Well, we were talking about some like crazy errors in the awards giving. I'm not going to say this was you, John, but what was it, Ovi, you were saying?
Yeah, there was one year that Ovi made the All-Star team on both the left wing and the right wing, which is honestly like rock star.
I mean, he does play like both minutes, like both full 2 minutes, both units on the power play. So, and he's been doing that for like 20 years. Yeah. So, given that, I mean, no, it's preposterous. That we make
it's crazy.
I feel like the best way to do it, I feel like, would just be like a normal survey, like
yes.
voting on anything. But I feel like then you could make a fake email and get in there.
Yeah,
like,
slip in.
Open to the public.
Like a John Matisz and a Mon Jadis kind of thing. Vote in. But it is time to get into the real award show, the one that actually
Scannies,
matters,
yes.
The Scannies. And we're going to start this off talking about teams. And this one here, I call the I hope your trip was worth it. Or no, I hope your trip was refundable, sorry. And last year's winner of this was the Caps, the worst team basically in history. I hope your trip was refundable. The team that's going to make the playoffs but has literally zero hope to do anything in the playoffs. And I'll let you start with your nominee, John, how this is going to work. Because you guys are going to give nominees for every award, and I will pick the winner based off those nominations. We'll actually see which of you guys can convince me the most throughout
Yeah, we're
this
gonna be
thing.
vouching.
John, take us away.
We're like lawyers or something.
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
It's got to be the Minnesota Wild for me. Like, they're two opponents, Golden Knights, Jets. There's just such a wide gap in the talent level between the Wild and those two teams. Like, after Kaprizov, Boldy, and Faber, I think things drop off pretty significantly on that roster. And I don't know. Like, say, like the more likely scenarios that they play the Golden Knights, and I think the Golden Knights are just such a buzzsaw and so well coached and have such great structure that, are we talking sweep? Are we talking 5 games? So it'll be quick for Minnesota.
Okay, moving on to case number 2 from Mr. Kyle Cushman.
Yeah, the Minnesota Wild, they have their star players at least, and that's something that the New Jersey Devils don't, where Jack Hughes is out of the lineup and you're going up against a really strong Carolina Hurricanes team that is so tough to go up against and score against as well. And I just look at the fact that they're not going to have Jack Hughes. They've got some injuries on the back end as well, where Jonas Siegenthaler, you don't know what his status is going to be. Dougie Hamilton, you don't know what his status is going to be. And you just look at those major injuries, and I just don't really see a path for them to realistically contend past that first round.
And Levi, finish it off one more case here.
I mean, I'm going with the team that still isn't even in, so that should probably add to my argument a little bit. The Montreal Canadiens, they're just limping their way there. But you just look at the makeup of this team. First of all, they're playing the team who won this award last year, so I think there's going to be – the Capitals surely know that they won this Scanny last year. There's going to be some serious revenge coming. But the Habs have had a great year. They're just very ahead of schedule. And I know Demidov is back, and he looked phenomenal in that first game. But they're one of the younger teams in the league still. Their goaltending isn't great. I think they're bottom 10 in goals against. I just don't really see any hope for the Habs pulling off an upset. I know they've done it before against the same team, but completely different eras and teams.
Well, you got to get yourself to the Bell Center to watch Demidov and Co. this spring, and Skyscanner can help you get to Montreal easier and cheaper. Just hit the link in our bio or description to score those deals. But I got to pick a winner here for this first award, and I'm actually going to go with John's pick, the Minnesota Wild.
Wow.
They've sucked recently. They've been
Yeah.
they went, what, it was like 8-7 against the Sharks. Any team going 8-7 against the Sharks and like must win. Like they could have clinched their playoff berth on Friday against the Flames, and they got smoked at the Saddledome. It was 4-0 going into the third. That was a wrap. If you can't get up for a game like that as the Wild, like, you're not doing anything in the playoffs. The caveat is if they do play the Jets are known chokers, so you never know what happens.
I will
Little
say,
jab at the
little
Jets.
jab at the Jets, but I'm not gonna.
I will
not
say,
gonna-
in John's defense, I was looking through the standings here because the Habs actually they might have the lowest points to get in like the last 9 years if they don't win. The Wild are very much into the negative in goal differential.
Yes.
I couldn't believe it. It was like a big red 20 or maybe 12, but it was very surprising to see that.
They've been limping
Yes.
to
Oh,
the
yeah.
playoffs since the Four Nations. But to be fair, they've been missing Kaprizov and Eric Sinek and numerous guys. But they're just getting those guys back now. I'm not sure, in my opinion. So I'll give this one to John. Get into award number 2. This one, the John Scott Award. This one is basically goes to the goon that had a pretty good season, like not just a goon out there, not just fighting or doing stupid stuff. And John, again, I'll let you take us away.
Matthew Olivier with the Columbus Blue Jackets. This guy has 18 goals, including 5-game winners. Very significant.
Ooh.
Pretty good.
129 penalty minutes and league-leading 15 hits. I mean, what more could you want? He gets a long-term deal, 6 years times $3 million. We'll see if that ages well, but the money's low. But, yeah, for whatever reason, the Blue Jackets love this guy. And, hey, he's produced at least this season. We'll see what happens next year. But maybe the toughest guy in the league and 18 goals. Not bad.
Yeah, this is a 24-25 season award. And Olivier has been more than just a glue guy for sure. Kyle, you got someone that can beat him, though?
I don't know if he can beat him. Definitely either in a fight or in this own award. But Marcus Foligno tied for 5th in major penalties this season without any misconducts as well. One behind a lot of the others except for Olivier, who's quite atop the board. But he's been really great this season. When you look at 14 goals, almost 30 points, when you look at those guys that have 9, 10 majors this season, he's second among that group in points to Olivier. And you look at his importance to the Wild down the stretch, where you mentioned they haven't been great. One of the few players that has been really good for them recently is Marcus Foligno, who's stepped up in some of those key moments. So we'll see how things end up playing out, whether the Blue Jackets make it in or what happens with the Wild and everything. But Marcus Foligno's been an important player here recently for the Wild.
Yeah, and Levi?
Yeah, I'm going with the guy. I mean, the goon in the NHL has definitely died down a lot over the last little bit. So this guy is by no means a scrappy fighter or a big time goon, but he's been, I think, top 50 in penalty minutes both of the last 2 years. And I mean, he made a name for himself in the NHL for stirring the pot. It's Ridley Gregg for the Ottawa Senators. He's actually stepped up big time for this team this year. He's great at killing penalties, probably their best penalty killer, and he's contributed. He's got 33 points, I believe. So a guy who's, I would say he's scrappier. Maybe he's not a goon per se, but he definitely likes to rough it up, and he's been a big part for the Sens this season.
Okay, so all I'll say here is if I had to rank these 3 players based on how good they were, I would go Greg, Foligno, Olivier.
Yeah.
But if Greg or Foligno were like put on an all-star team, for example, it wouldn't be the meme that was John Scott.
No.
Yeah.
Matthew Olivier is a goon.
Olivier is the easy pick.
He's never going anywhere but your 4th line. So that's gonna be another Scanny to John's
Wow.
team here.
Wow,
The
boys.
John Scott Award goes to Matthew Olivier. Absolute beast. I don't think anybody wants to fight him in the NHL. And he's got 18 goals, you said?
Yeah,
Yeah,
insane
yeah.
season for
Electric.
him.
He's been
And
Yeah.
very
that's
good.
the kind of Columbus has been so hurt this year. They've needed stuff like that from guys to step up. Olivier has stepped up. Award number 3 on this list, the Galaxy Brain Award, goes to the GM who hurt his team more than he helped it, basically. We will go again, though, with John to start us off.
Kevin Adams in Buffalo. So my main thought process here is that I don't mind that he traded Dylan Cousins or tried to shake up the core, but it's the package that he got. It's the uninspiring deal that he concocted where and it was basically Cousins for Norris. There's other pieces, but these are the main pieces. And Norris is slightly older than Cousins, slightly more expensive, and definitely more injury prone. So what are we doing here? What was that trade? Sure, you're sort of like taking a risk anytime you make a trade like that, but it hasn't worked out so far, as we see with Ottawa and Cousins working out so well. And then, so there's that. One thing I do like about what Adams has done is that he made that Ryan McLeod trade, and he's been a fantastic fit in Buffalo. But when you look at everything else he's done, he hasn't done a lot, which, is part of the issue with what he's done in Buffalo. He re-signs Jordan Greenway. He re-signs Jason Zucker, fine in a vacuum. But, what is this team? These are your veterans. These are your sort of, guys that you look up to. So, is this Kevin Adams? Is it his problem, or is it the owner not giving him the rope? Terry Pegula? I don't know. But nevertheless, Buffalo is headed towards the 14th straight non-playoff year. And Adams just hasn't done a ton to mix things up.
The tough one about Kevin Adams here, though, is the voter fatigue, because I think he's been in the running a few times. So what do we got for number 2 here?
Don Sweeney, and this one's a pretty easy one for me, where let's just look at the timeline here. Traded Linus Ullmark early, actually just before Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, which
Hilarious.
Should automatically get you the Galaxy Brain Award for making some kind of trade like that. But you do that, and then you don't get Jeremy Swayman signed until just before the season. That derails the start of your season in terms of the goaltending. So you got that factor there. The just disaster in free agency, over $50 million to Elias Lindholm, $30 million to Nikita Zadorov, 2 long-term contracts that you're probably not going to get out of anytime soon. So you've got that in the summer. Then you get into the season, things aren't going well. You fire Jim Montgomery, one of the best coaches in the NHL. Things do not right the ship. In fact, they've gotten way worse over the season. So it definitely wasn't a coaching situation. And then you look at the trade deadline, and you trade Brad Marchand, a franchise legend, for a conditional second-round pick. And obviously, there's a lot of factors involved in terms of why it wasn't that much you got in trade return. But when you're trading somebody like Brad Marchand and you don't get that kind of trade return, in addition to everything that has happened this season, Don Sweeney, Galaxy Brain for me, even though in the end they're going to end up with a top 5 pick most likely here and get at least a silver lining out of this season, Don Sweeney for me.
Yeah.
They did get a good haul at the deadline, and they will be in a good spot to have maybe an impactful first round for the first chance at that in 10 years. We talked about that pre-show 10 years ago with the infamous Zaboral Senshin DeBrusque run right before Connor Shabbat and Barzal. So hopefully it goes better for Boston this summer. But
Hey, speak for yourself. I don't know about hopefully.
Same GM as before, right?
Yeah.
Will Sweeney be the one calling those shots is another question.
Seems likely.
Yeah, I think
likely.
he's gotten a vote of confidence here. Yeah.
But Levi, do you got someone that can beat that?
I feel pretty good about this. Stan Bowman. Oilers brought him in. They needed a mix-up. And what's the first move he does is not bring back Holloway and Broberg, who are on a phenomenal run. And he goes, okay, no Dylan Holloway. Maybe I'll just replace him with, Victor Arvidsson, Jeff Skinner, some good pickups. Holloway's got more points than both of them combined. So that alone really just blows my mind. You also look at, this Oilers team was a win away from the Cup. And the roster shakeup that he did, where he didn't even bother to go look for a goalie, and now they're relying again on Calvin Pickard and Stuart Skinner. The deadline moves, they were rather quiet. Trent Frederick doesn't move the needle for me at all, and what they did there. So when you have two of the best players in the league on the same team, you have to do everything you can to take that next step. And to be a win away and to not have a massive shakeup somewhere on this team, it's Galaxy Brain for sure. I don't exactly know what he's thinking.
That's a great pick.
Yeah, shocking to me that they didn't fully take advantage of Evander Kane missing a full season of the LTIR too. You see everyone do it, every contender do it. It's why are they not fully taking advantage of that? The Oilers, I think, is the toughest one because they're still obviously a good team. They're going to be in the playoffs, but I mean, this might be the most banged up, hurt, least inspiring Oilers team.
Yeah, and you look at John mentioned it. They'd love a guy like Ryan McLeod right now.
Yep.
Just
Absolutely.
dump him
There's
away
another
for Matthew Savoy. Is that
yeah.
what it was?
Savoy has been great in the AHL, but he's in the AHL. They don't need guys in the AHL right now. They need guys like Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg coming into their own as in their early mid-20s. So I'm actually going to go with Stan Bowman. I think all three of these guys could deserve the Galaxy Brain Scanny, but this one's going to go to Levi's Stan Bowman pick. Not exactly a great start to his tenure in Edmonton.
No,
they were
great
clamoring,
headshot.
They were clamoring to get Ken Holland out of there in Alberta, and I think they might be missing him a little bit right now.
I think so.
Yeah. Next one, though, we go from the Galaxy Brain, not a great boss, to the world's best boss. This goes to the best captain in the NHL. I'm curious which way you guys go with this one. And, John, let's see what you got.
This one was pretty easy for me as far as what's been going on in Vancouver. So Quinn Hughes is my pick, and he's been caught in the middle of all the headlines, all the negative headlines out there because he's the captain, because everyone wants to know what does Quinn Hughes think about this. So there was obviously the JT Miller and Elias Pettersson drama that dragged on for months and months. There was even just the individual Elias Pettersson slumping drama, if you will, where he has not looked himself all season. Quinn is obviously going to talk to Elias a lot about that and try to figure out what's going on, move him through the season in some way, shape, or form. Then you've got Rick Tocchet is on an expiring contract, and Hughes has to answer questions about his coach, and his coach is kind of not giving answers himself. So there's that going on, the uncertainty with that. There's Demko getting injured, and then there's Brock Besser. He's not been signed all season, and it looks like he's going to walk into free agency. So this whole dark cloud has been around the Canucks all season. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of sort of noise, if you want to call it that. And Quinn Hughes, when he's been healthy, he did have a stretch where he's injured, which is unfortunate. When he's been healthy, MVP caliber season every day of the week. So clearly whatever's been going on in Vancouver hasn't affected him on the ice. And I think, from afar, we don't know, we're not inside the walls, but from afar, it seems like he's been a pretty good captain in the room to hold it all together to some extent. Because this could have went extremely south on the ice, but they were in or around the playoff bubble for a long time there, despite all the problems.
Yeah, it's shocking how bad a season, everything's gone so bad in Vancouver except for Quinn Hughes, the captain there. He's had an electric season there. Kyle, you got someone that can beat it, though?
Yeah, I'm looking to a bit more of an off-ice situation here, and that's Boone Jenner with the Columbus Blue Jackets, where everyone expected the Blue Jackets to be like a lottery team this year, contending for a first overall pick. And that was before, obviously, the tragedy last summer of the passing of Johnny Gaudreau and his brother. And just the way that a leadership group has to navigate just an unfathomable tragedy like that. And to have the season that the Blue Jackets have had is extremely impressive to me. And so Jenner being the captain there, being the key leader among that group in Columbus, and obviously he missed a lot of time due to injury this season, so primarily looking off the ice here. But in terms of the role of a captain, of course, we talk about leadership in the locker room and such, but it's also being a front-facing person for the team and in the community and everything. And I look at the season that the Blue Jackets have had, given everything that has happened, not even just this season, but looking over the recent years when you look at Matisz and his passing as well, everything that this organization has gone through. I think it really says a lot about the leadership group that they have there, the players that have been there year over year, and Boone Jenner is the head of that as the team captain.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy season in Columbus, sad and also inspiring, and they still have a shot to make the playoffs.
Absolutely.
Here, so it'll be interesting to see these last couple of games this week for the Blue Jackets. Levi, who you got here?
Yeah, my pick here, I'm going with Brady Tkachuk. This is my favorite style of captain ever. A guy who's fourth in the league in penalty minutes, and he's also obviously great player, top 3 in scoring on the Senators. But the way that he's been here from the jump with the Sens, they haven't been in the playoffs for 8 years now, and he's been there for a good chunk of that. One of the younger captains in the league. Just the way that he leads this team, and for it to finally pay off and for them to crack the playoffs. That's my favorite part about all this is his gritty style, his scrappy style. He just gets his nose in there and he roughs it up, and for it to finally pay off with a successful team around him is the best. And I think every team wants a guy like that at the helm for sure.
This is a really hard one for me because in terms of on-ice accomplishments, it's probably Brady Tkachuk because it's like obviously his team made the playoffs, so that's a big consideration. In terms of off-ice stuff, it's probably Boone Jenner. My reason I don't think I'm going to go with Boone Jenner here is just because he didn't play all that much this season, and I think it was while he was probably a great captain, it was a by committee thing there. I feel like basically every single person in that organization just stepped up this year. They could have been horrible in Columbus this season. It could have been.
They should have been
a disaster. They should have been really bad. They obviously lost their best player to a tragedy before the season even started. But I actually am going to go with the Quinn Hughes pick here for the world's best boss because just in my mind, the dealing with 2 star players basically wanting to fight each other on the ice and off the ice, and somehow they didn't fight each other on the ice or off the ice, and then also just like being so much better than every other person on your team, except for maybe Kiefer Sherwood, who also is that guy.
He's so sick.
I feel like I'm gonna go with Quinn Hughes. So that means John's got a pretty huge lead.
Wow.
That's 3 for John, 1 for Levi early, and Kyle's sitting on the donut. But we still have
Getting some
another
retribution for trivia.
Yeah, another
what's going
4
on.
awards here to go. But first, Skyscanner's Explore Everywhere Search is the travel hack that can help you compare endless destinations while getting you the best deal every single time. Links in the description and our bio to get you started. Next award here is the Why Are You the Way That You Are award. And this one goes to the biggest bonehead in the league. And we're going to start with Matisz.
I'm going to go with Barry Trotz. So I didn't include him in the GM conversation because I wanted to save him for this one.
Oh, okay.
So if you guys look back on the moves that he's made since he got hired in, I believe it was July 2023, he's missed on like 95% of them. So obviously we're not focusing on the full body of work. We're focusing on this year. But even this year, Jankowski, Novak, Askarov, Tomasino, Carrier, all those guys have been traded. And yes, he got like futures back, but like they're doing pretty well in their new organizations. They're all relatively young. Could they have been part of the solution in Nashville? Maybe. Like it feels like he maybe misplayed his hand on at least a couple of those. And then you look at the signings in the summer: Stamkos, Marchessault, Shea. None of them have worked out, and they're all signed long term. So I was really happy when Barry Trotz got hired. It's really cool for a head coach to go to GM. Like, what a story. You know, Predators, he bleeds for that community and that team, but like it has not been pretty. And this year in particular, it's like he needs a win. He needs a win at this point. So, you know, bonehead's a strong word, but like if we're looking at just like stumbling over yourself consistently, Barry Trotz has been that guy.
I am shocked at the impact Mark Jankowski is still having in the NHL. I thought that guy was finished like 7-8 years ago after he had his 4-goal game against Vegas. That was a high moment. Never thought he'd get
He should have
back to
walked
it.
out after that.
Yeah, he's been actually electric in Carolina, which is hilarious. Kyle, who you got from here?
Ryan Hartman. I think when you think about what bonehead means, I think slamming a guy's head into the ice is probably up there on the list of bonehead moves that you can do. He got dinged for 10 games. It got dropped to 8 games after the appeal process, but he lost over $400,000 by slamming a guy's head into the ice. So when talking about bonehead moves, losing over $400K to do that for no apparent reason, that's a pretty bonehead move to me.
And Levi, who you got?
Yeah, at first I thought the obvious answer here was going to be Matt Rempe, but I wanted to get a little bit more specific here and get in the weeds a bit more. And I'm just going JT Miller for we talked about before, that whole saga. I mean, he's the guy that got chipped out, so sorry, JT Miller, I'm putting the blame on you for all that. And I think some of those reports, they were pretty tight-lipped about it. I was trying to do some digging, but pretty hush-hush about that whole situation. But he seemed like he was being a bit of a baby this year, a bit of a bonehead. And it kind of derailed the Canucks season after they had a great year, derailed his own season. JT Miller's my pick.
And he never really figured it out in New York either. He was like had some good moments with the Rangers.
He got caught up with Matt Rempe over there.
Yeah, but
a couple
it's
boneheads.
It's just a kind of the bonehead organization that is the New York Rangers right now. Like, who knows what the future is.
We could have included Chris Drury here, right?
Oh my god!
Yeah.
There's a lot of picks this year.
That famous group text, right?
Yep.
The group text heard around the world where he's got, Kreider in there, Trouba. Obviously, he ends up moving Trouba, but like that was the beginning of the end for their season in terms of like the drama. We talk about Vancouver, like New York was just as bad in terms of the drama. So Chris Drury's honorable mention.
The guy I thought one of you guys was going to bring up was Matthew Tkachuk for going into the final and being like, I'm going to plays like 3 shifts, and then that makes the U.S. play a man down and then misses the rest of the season. That was a little boneheady from
That's
Matty
also
Tkachuk.
like the coach and the trainers, though, and the GM. Like,
But like, come on, that's the whole maybe USA Hockey should be in the bonehead conversation.
there you go. Now that makes more sense. But you're right. That is a little like selfish, you could say, if you're not ready to go.
Like who was it? Kyle Connor sitting up in the press box.
Yep.
They probably didn't want Kyle Connor at that point to be playing, but yeah.
LTIR scheming.
Yeah, it's all intentional
Genius.
to come
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
Tinfoil hat. It's all intentional, so Florida can somehow be stronger when they
Zito
take
was
on
there.
the Toronto
Zito
Maple
was
Leafs.
part of the brass there.
Yeah, so he obviously allowed it to happen. I'm actually, for this one, I was just so stuck on the New York Rangers when I got to think bonehead stuff, so I am going to go with JT Miller. Levi,
Nice.
you get another
it.
point here, but honestly, thinking about it, the $400,000 thing is a big play for the Ryan Hartman one.
When you mentioned the money, like
when you put it in that perspective, it's really tough. But we got JT Miller as the pick in here. We got to get into the next one here, which is the Pat Maroon Award. Goes to the player that basically got carried, doesn't deserve any part of his team, or didn't contribute to his team success. Not deserve. Pat Maroon deserves a lot of things. It just didn't really contribute to that. Happy retirement, Pat Maroon. You had a great career. You just, on all those cup runs and stuff, you didn't play a huge role. So we're talking about guys who didn't play a huge role on their team's success. And John, who you got?
Brent Burns of the Carolina Hurricanes. So, one, he makes a ton of money and he's not living up to it. Two, he has 6 goals total, 0 on the power play this year. His main reason for being on this Carolina team is to shoot pucks on net, also on the power play. He's been taken off it. He was on PP1, though, for a huge part of the season. And he's just showing his age. I mean, he turned 40 in March, so this isn't surprising, but I feel like his contract also stopped Carolina from doing even more tinkering around the deadline. Whereas if it was like a league minimum guy or guy making $3 or $4 million, they would have been able to make a little more noise. So, things have really gone south for Brent Burns. And the fact that he makes that money and he is the guy he is as far as his stature and resume, he's probably getting more minutes than he should. And I think he's being carried significantly by Jacob Slavin.
True. Well, it's fair. It's easy to get carried by Jacob Slavin. That guy is fantastic. Who you got here, Kyle?
I've got Travis Hamonic from the Ottawa Senators, where we have player on-ice data, shift-by-shift stuff since 2007. And since that span, no defenseman who's played over 800 minutes has been on the ice for fewer 5-on-5 goals. 15 all season long for Travis Hamonic, which is just over 1 per 60.
Which is more than Teethy has, though, still.
There you go. Hey, there you go.
6 or 7 of those ones,
it just has not been a good season for Travis Hamonic. He's played on the third pairing, has had to play higher up the lineup at times due to some injuries, and he's just not that defenseman anymore. And the Senators have made the playoffs. It's great to see that, but he's very much a liability on the back end. And when you look at that staggering stat of being on the ice for only 15 5-on-5 goals all season long,
it's crazy.
That's the pretty much definition of not really doing much to your team.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that he's just floated around the bottom pairing on a bunch of different Canadian organizations over the last few years. And I remember when Finland called up like Matt and Paolo or something like that. I just saw this tweet that it was like, how is Matt and Paolo getting called up Finland, but they're still going to find a way to play Hamonic over him. Yes. I guess Ottawa fans aren't a huge fan of that guy either. Who you got, Levi?
I'm going with a guy I kind of dogged on already once on the show, Jeff Skinner.
Oh, man, you're such a Skinner hater.
Yeah, Skinner hater. I mean, it's not even his fault that they brought him in and stuff, the way that he's never even been to the postseason. So it's hard to say that he's ever been carried or carried any good teams, obviously. But, I mean, the guy's got, I think, 28 points. It's hard to have that little of an impact when you're playing with 2 of the best players in the league. He's been on Connor McDavid's left wing for a little bit as of late. He was playing with Draisaitl. I think he was getting health bombed earlier in the year, like wasn't even playing. It's Jeff Skinner. I mean, for a guy to have and be slotted in for such an integral role and to not do very much with it at all, definition of getting carried in my books.
I think the tough thing for Skinner is like you think of him as a guy that could be really good on a power play, but he's not making it onto that Oilers first power play unit, and their second unit's never scored a goal, I think, ever in the history of the McDavid Draisaitl era. I'm going with Hamonic here. I think
finally, there we go.
He's on the board.
Yes, this was not deliberate, Kyle. I'm just
no, it's all good.
The comeback.
I'll remember that for the next trivia.
But I would just, when I think about it, Travis Hamonic, like. The Ottawa Senators have had such a perfect season for them. Everything has kind of come together, except for Travis Hamonic has not played his part. I thought a lot of people thought they were going to upgrade on that spot for this postseason run. They didn't really do all that.
They traded out Bernard Docker.
Exactly. Yeah. They're like, we need more minutes from Travis Hamonic. We need to get rid of this stat. So, all right. So we're getting into our next award here, and this is one that should be an award but isn't an award. This is one that goes to the best defensive defenseman in the league. Matisz.
Kyle set me up here because this guy played 30% of his 5-on-5 shifts with Travis Hamonic.
Ooh.
Which is, a compliment to Jake Sanderson, the guy that I'm picking here, where there was a point earlier in the season when Artem Zub was out where it was Sanderson and Hamonic, and it wasn't pretty, at least on one side of the ice. But Sanderson I look at as basically a younger Jacob Slavin, but someone who has more offensive juice. So, give it a year or two, and he will be better than Slavin. Slavin obviously getting older, he comes down a notch. Sanderson rises, especially with a little more puck moving ability. I'm in love with the skating ability, the reach, the smarts. He has such great poise out there, and he ranks super high in a bunch of sport logic categories like block passes, D zone denials, loose puck recoveries. Like, these are things that we have access to now that we didn't before, and it sort of reveals, okay, this guy is as good as we think defensively. Forsling and Slavin are always up there, Uyghur, Werenski, guys like that. So the fact that he's this young and this good, it's so tantalizing, and I think that this year he really asserted himself as a number one defenseman on not only Ottawa, but like league wide. He's cracking the top 10.
Yeah, no, he had an incredible year, and I think people really figured out at Four Nations that he's a part of this elite U.S. crop of defensemen. That is just a long list, and there's just more coming. Yeah. Kyle, who you got for us?
Well, I'd like to thank John for making my point for me as well, because he just said Jacob Slavin's better than Jake Sanderson. So there you go. No, Jacob Slavin, I think when you're talking about a shutdown defenseman that you want for one game, winner takes all, who do you want as that defensive presence on your team? I think most people are taking Jacob Slavin right now, and I think we saw that at the Four Nations face-off, where he was the most used defenseman for Team USA, playing those huge minutes against the likes of Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon, etc., and was that supremely fantastic rush defender and in-zone defender, where he just has such a calming presence on the back end as a good skater with a good reach and a good puck mover. And as John mentioned earlier, Brent Burns has not been great this season as well, has done a lot of carrying in that regard as well, plays some of the toughest matchups in the NHL as well in terms of quality of competition. Sure, there are some other defensemen this season that have had maybe better 5-on-5 goal metrics or such. You think of like a Vladislav Gavrikov in that way. But for me, in terms of a single game, who are you taking for their defensive ability in a winner takes all? For me, it's still Jacob Slavin.
Yeah, Slavin, I feel like, was one of the most commonly talked about players at the Four Nations because of just like
I think
people
that's
were watching
the
him,
player that had their stock rise the most.
Gold medal game, he was unbelievable.
He was. Yeah. He did have that get clipped by McDavid, though. I don't know if
that was the week after, though.
Oh my gosh, we did Four Nations. I'm not gonna say that's skewing my vote, but like watch.
They weren't playing
highlight.
for anything.
This guy's going on one highlight.
Oh my goodness, was just preposterous what McDavid did to that guy. But Slavin's incredible. Levi.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to tip my cap to John as well, because he gave my guy a shout out as well, Gustav Forsling.
Look what I'm doing to myself.
Gustav Forsling. I think he said those two together, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, Sanderson's
setting you guys up.
Yeah.
He's getting to the Forsling-Slavin level. But no, this guy, I think in the last year, since that cup run that they made last year, he's really put himself on the map. And when I was there in Edmonton listening to Paul Maurice go on a 5-minute spiel about how he's the best, not just defenseman, but best athlete in the NHL with just his motor and how he shuts guys down and doesn't get the credit he deserves. I think he's 7th right now in plus minus, and he's been top 10 for like the last 3 or 4 years. Just an absolute lockdown guy on the D end that Florida... Like, he doesn't still get the credit he deserves. Like, you look at that Panthers defensive and you're like, oh, Ekblad's great. They got Seth Jones. But Gustav Forsling is like, you need to have a Gustav Forsling to win the Stanley Cup. They did it last year, and he's carried it into this season and just been an absolute unit back there. So it's an easy pick for me.
Can we pause for a second on like all three of these players, excellent skaters, not overly physical. Like, being a defensive defenseman.
That's the modern
this year,
defensive defenseman.
Or not this year, but yeah, this era is different than like even 10 years ago. If you go back 20, 30 years, I mean, it was all bruisers like, I don't know, Rob Blake or whoever, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So I saw Dom, I don't even know how to pronounce it. Letition. He posted something about his like Stanley Cup criteria checklist thing. And there's the defenseman with the best defensive rating in a playoff, like a Stanley Cup playoff winner run over the last like 10 years, something like that, was Colton Parayko in 2019. The other guys in that consideration were it was just Hjalmarsson. Was the only two, like Hjalmarsson twice, and then Parayko, and then the closest to that was Devon Taves.
Wow.
In terms of highest defensive rating over a cup run, which is a really impressive stat. I'm not saying that Parayko should have been. I think he's a guy you could probably add to this sort of grouping of elite defenders. But for this one, it's got to be Slavin for me. Going back to you, Kyle, for back-to-back wins here. Put yourself back in it.
Come back out.
What is the score?
But the Scannie goes to, for this should be an award, but isn't an award, goes to Jacob Slavin. Because I just think when it comes to just like reputation, it's been Slavin for a long time. And then I think the world kind of really found that out at the Four Nations, just how incredible he is. Despite getting clipped by Davo, he is
The thing with people have been vouching for this award almost because of him for
Yeah.
the last
Yeah.
couple
100%.
seasons.
Pretty
Now
much,
they're like,
yeah.
we need this
That
award
says
to
a lot.
recognize Slavin. But I'll say too, you keep alluding to it. I didn't want to say it until you made your decision. Yeah, that Four Nation. That was maybe one of the first times I've watched a hockey game, and the one guy that stood out to me was a guy just playing really good defense.
Yeah.
He was incredible in that game.
Yeah, okay,
Both of those
honorary shout out on this award. I want to give one to Chris Tanev, who just literally eats
Yeah.
pucks.
I
He's
was-
down to
yeah.
4 or 5 teeth at this point because of you.
And that's
take
another
from the
modern
face.
defenseman who doesn't really hit much.
Yeah,
No.
and that's just it goes to show that there are so many defenders that don't get enough credit.
Mhm.
And this is actually my petition right now that this award that we called should be an award but isn't an award. It literally should be an award.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a forward equivalent, right? The Selke. So
Yeah,
I
the
guess
reason-
why not?
Yeah, and well, it's because I think initially when you thought of the Norris, the best defenseman, that's what it should be. But it is
Right.
it has
Things have
turned
changed so much.
Now
it
it's
has
just-
turned into the point per game defenseman
Yes.
wins the award.
Best
basically.
offensive defenseman.
Yes, so that's it's tough, but I'm not going to take that away from our probable winner, who is Cale Makar this year. He's also good in his own end, but he's not Slavin.
Yeah, Cale
or
McCarr's
Forsling.
pretty okay.
Yeah,
at
he's
hockey.
pretty okay in his own end. I'd probably take Cale Makar on my team over Jacob Slavin for one game.
Maybe.
But when it comes to actually defending, probably Slavin. Okay, so I think going into this, Kyle and Levi at 2, John at 3.
Ooh.
One award left. And this is the You Deserve Better award. The player who carried his team the hardest this season, and they weren't very good anyway. So, John, what you got?
I'm going to go a little under the radar with Igor Shesterkin. The Rangers have been a tire fire defensively. Most shots against, Shesterkin has faced the most shots against, most slot shots, most inner slot shots. He still has a .903 save percentage, which doesn't seem high, but the league average right now is .900. So he's above league average. And if you look at Sportlogic's data, gold save above expected, he's one of a handful that have 30 or more. So he's been one of the best goaltenders if you factor in the environment that he's playing behind. And I don't know, there's something about the goaltending position that I'm drawn to in this scenario where it's you're just left out to dry. You're stuck out there for 60 minutes when other guys can just go on the bench and get a breather and just focus on their own individual games. So Shesterkin's my pick, and I'll just shout out Ilya Sorokin too, who sort of was in a similar situation with the Islanders, where we think of the Islanders as a good defensive team, but that's kind of old news. That's 3 or 4 years ago. They're not now. And so Sorokin's been dealing with a lot of the same things as Shesterkin in terms of you go out there and you're a high-quality goalie, and it doesn't matter. So Shesterkin's my guy.
Yeah, no, Shesterkin's literally the only player in New York who's had a good year.
Even Adam Fox, who's
Yeah.
so consistent, had a bad year.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of players who had good years in
Cooley.
New York.
I guess
Cooley,
Yeah, Will
yeah,
Cooley.
Cooley.
Yeah.
All these guys that aren't the big names kind of thing. All their big names have taken a huge step back this year. Kyle, who you got for this one?
Quinn Hughes for me, where I think the most staggering stat is that there's a 10% swing in shot attempts with Quinn Hughes on the ice versus off the ice for the Canucks. It's 55% to 45%, which is an insane swing for one player. He's a defenseman, leads the team in scoring by over 25 points despite missing time this season as well. And there's just no player that has had to deal with as much noise around the team and still succeed the way that Quinn Hughes has, where at midseason we were talking about him as a legitimate Norris and MVP candidate given what was going on in Vancouver and the position that the team was still in. Vancouver, given everything that has happened this year, has no business being remotely close to the playoffs. And obviously they ended up being eliminated pretty early on versus expectations, but they should have been out well before that given everything that happened between trading JT Miller, Elias Pettersson not being as good as you expect and having some big slumps this year, Brock Besser having an off year, and then the contract stuff, Rick Tocchet not being extended. Everything that was going on, the Canucks should have been well out of the playoff picture probably 2-3 months ago, honestly. And they weren't because of Quinn Hughes and his just remarkable season. So for me, Quinn Hughes deserved so much better. Plus, his injury had him out of Four Nations, which is the biggest blow.
Plus, he won World's Best Boss. So obviously, I'm a fan of the Quinn Hughes Hughes guy. Levi, who you got for this one?
I'm going with David Pasternak, and this
such
is
a
the
good pick.
most. When I was doing not even my research, it's pretty common knowledge now. He has 104 points. The next highest scorer on the Boston Bruins has 56 points. I don't know how that's possible. He's got 48 more points than the next highest guy. Now, I know they've shipped out a couple guys who probably would have been a little bit higher, and like Marchand or Coyle, but he's actually gotten better since those guys left. With like Morgan Geekie and Elias Lindholm, I believe the two guys, he's been flirting with like 2 points per game for the last stretch of games of the season here. But just literally looking on paper at a guy who almost has double the amount of points as the next guy. He's also 4th in the league in scoring. The Bruins are honestly lucky that they were still able to out-tank how good David Pasternak's been. Incredible season for a guy on a really bad team.
Okay, before I announce my winner here, I'm just saying, if any of you guys really wanted to like secure yourself a dub, you should have thrown Dustin Wolf's name in that pot. Just saying. But
Well, they're going to make the playoffs.
they could make the
that's true.
playoffs. There's a chance. There's realistically a chance.
This is gonna be dumb because I'm gonna help out Levi's chances here, but let me jump in with a Pasternak stat because I was doing some research on him the other day. His primary points, like if you look at goals and primary assists, so you're directly impacting the goal. He has 40% of Boston's for the whole year. So like this is the guy who's on the ice for a third of the game, and he's affecting 4 out of 10 goals. Like it's kind of wild. It's kind of hard to compute that, like how alone he is offensively there.
It's crazy.
Well, I think you made it clear. The Scanny for "You Deserve Better" goes to David Pastrnak.
Thank you, John.
Levi. That is he's had an incredible year, and on a really, really bad Boston Bruins team. I'm really curious to see what Boston does with him, because on one side they could give him the C. On another side, they could go get an absolute haul
Blow it
for
up,
David
yeah.
Pastrnak, because they're already bad. Do they see themselves keeping that window together? It is Boston. I really doubt they would move a Pastrnak or a McAvoy.
Wouldn't it make sense to just rebuild or retool around McAvoy, Swayman, and
They've got a lot of
three
young
guys.
assets now.
Yeah.
They've just got these like a lot of bad contracts now too to deal
the
with.
Lindholm one really
But
hurts.
with the cap going up the way it is, and with your like top guys secured for so long, I would guess that Boston sticks it out at least for a couple seasons.
they're looking at Washington and going, we can do what they
we can
did.
do that, 100%.
Copycat league.
Yeah,
Will they? I
100%. It is a copycat league, and I think it'll be curious to see what happens. Before we finish up here, so I think that's kind of a tie at the end there with
is.
3 Levi, 3
3-3.
John, Kyle.
That's okay.
Rock, paper, scissors?
It's okay. If we were to pull out the trivia board, which we're not getting into today, Kyle can make up for.
I'm
in
feeling
those
okay.
spots. Yeah. So John, you are voting now this Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had one other question. So obviously they want you to put your votes in before the playoffs start.
Yep, correct.
But do you think it's like pretty much like everyone's votes? Are your votes like locked in at this point with like, I don't know, it's what, like 20 games left on the NHL slate, and maybe that?
More or less. I mean,
Yeah.
like that's like nothing of the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't sat down and like officially written it out, but like in my head, I have, okay, this guy's going here. At the end, like in the last week of the season, that's when I consider like the 4th and 5th spots, because you submit 5 names per award, but only 3 finalists obviously get named. So, say with the Heart, it's like I've been locked in on, Hellebuck and McKinnon and a couple other guys, but it's like, okay, who's the 5th guy there, right? So that's when you sit down and try to go through the numbers and just think about, on a global basis, how does this guy fit into this conversation?
Do you ever give a guy like a random shout out, just like a throw?
I try not to. Like, I try to take it pretty seriously because
Toss it
it's a real like privilege and honor. Like, sounds lame and cliche, but it is. It's like you submit it and you like it feels really, really cool. I guess would be the way to
It
put
impacts players' legacies.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I remember Michael Backlund getting some Selke votes, some 5th place Selke votes one day, and I was
There was
like,
one
respect.
season that James Reimer got a 5th place Hart Trophy vote.
Yeah, attaboy Rhymes.
He's been on a bit of a run for Buffalo.
There you go.
you can throw
Let's
him
get
in
him
there.
on that.
So we
5th
know what
spot.
ballot he's going to be on.
So we got one more show here on Skyscanner coming Thursday. There's a chance playoffs matchups are set that day. There's a chance it could be going to that night. But we are going to be previewing every playoff matchup on Thursday. So make sure you come back for that one. For Levi Smith, Kyle Cushman, John Matisz, and myself, and everyone over at Skyscanner, this is all the time we got, and we will see you next time.